feeling like I let my team down on Monday and trying to get back to the player that I am and that they know me for. So I just went off of rebounds first and then just trying to score as much as I can and do whatever it takes to win. My defense wasn't the best on Monday, so that was important for me tonight to get a better defensive stance and try to guard my opponent the best I can.
Crowds like this should become normal for women's basketball, and I think Iowa has a great history of obviously Title IX and putting women's sports at the forefront and making it important. Hard to wrap my head around the environments that we get to play in, but I never take it for granted, and we're very far from home, and we still have an incredible crowd and many young girls that are screaming our names, and at the end of the day, that's what matters more than scoring points.
Terrika Foster-Brasby, welcome back from Paris, which we will talk about in a little bit, but thank you for joining me and Kelsey today. The women's basketball season for college is among us. It is here, and it has started off with a bang, from starting off in Paris to some big games, some upsets, and we're only a few games in, Terrika. So we heard from, to me right now, in my opinion, the two faces of women's college basketball, I think, in terms of players. Look, everyone's all in on Caitlin and Angel. We know whether it's to critique her or to praise her. People can't keep Angel's name out of their mouths. And we know she leads in NIL. Like she's that girl. So, let's start with Angel Reese and LSU, because Terrika, I didn't even think this is where I was going to go until I was actually preparing for this segment today. And I just saw the amount of criticism about Angel after that first game where Colorado upset LSU, right? And shout out to Colorado because they deserve all the praise for that. But I saw all this criticism of Angel, and then I saw all these headlines, about them being upset in the loss. And then I was struggling just to get a headline about her dominant performance last night with 28 points and 14 boards, where they bounced back quite lovely, And so I was just like, what is this thing with people? What is this thing that people have where they just want to critique Angel Reese? What is their issue with her? I mean, I know what their issue is with her, but what do you think this is about, Terrika?
I honestly wish that I could give you a good reason, but there is no good reason as to why so many people feel like there is this thing that hangs over their head when it comes to Angel Reese. And the only thing that I could think of, and stop me if you've heard this before, but it's just that Black women can't never just do us and be ourselves without there being some additional criticism on how we do it. It's just the way the world works. And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I think there's just been a lot of excitement around Angel Reese, and there's been a lot of coverage on the things that she's been doing off the court from her NILs, which I hope we get a chance to talk to, because there's a talk about later on in this segment, because I got something I need to address when it comes to that. But
okay.
I think I know what.
Okay, I
want to hear this. got to address that real quick, but we'll come back to that.
Finish it, and I'm gonna go there. Finish this.
Yes. But when it comes to the NIL, when it comes to the music videos, when it comes to the relationship with her boyfriend who also plays basketball, all of those things have dominated the headlines that it feels like people are just looking for a reason to say, hey, see, you were so focused on doing everything else that you didn't come out ready to play, blah, 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 blah. And the truth is, one, none of those things affect how you come out ready to play. The truth is, it's a new team. This is not the same LSU team that won a championship in 2023 earlier this year. This is a slightly different team. They're missing their veteran guard and Alexis Morris, who was so critical to their success last year, specifically in the Final Four and in those games leading up to that. And when you lose a veteran point guard, that's a big deal. We even talk about that in the W, that having a good, solid point guard is something that makes or breaks teams, especially what makes good teams. So that's something they have to look forward to. She's also playing for the first time with Anissa Morrow and Haley Van Lith, and it's all about chemistry. How often have we talked about how teams have to play with chemistry or learn to figure that out as they're developing themselves to get good? And then number 3, Colorado wasn't a scrub. Like, Colorado wasn't a team that just came out of nowhere. This was a team that made it to the Sweet 16 last year before losing to eventually Iowa, who went on to play in the national championship. But this wasn't a team of scrubs. I mean, Vonleh can ball. I'm sorry, Vonleh, I don't want to say her name correctly, but Vonleh can ball. You know what I mean? So yeah. I just don't, I think that there are a combination of things, and those who are truly following and understand women's basketball get that. But for those who are just hopping in a conversation because they just want to be critical, I think those are the ones who are louder than everyone else and coming up with these really ridiculous reasons as to why they lost that home opener. And to put the icing on the cake, I agree with Kim Mulkey when I think that they didn't come out with the type of intensity that we wanted to see out of LSU to start the game. They really felt flat early on. Colorado took advantage of it, and they went on to win the game in dominant fashion. And as you can see from last night against Queens, they kind of got their junk back.
Exactly. You know, like, look, shout out to Frida Foreman. She had a big night. Like I said, I don't want to take away from what Colorado did in that game. And yes, you mentioned Vonleh, and just, yes, anyone who watches the NBA, that is Noah Vonleh's sister, if that helps you. So yeah. And I think similar to Reggie and Cheryl, she may be the better player of the two. She may be the better player of the two. Okay. But, you know, I saw these like reassessing, you know, LSU. From one game, we got to reassess their standings and what they are from off of one game. Like, yes, I get it. It was a big upset, hasn't been done. You know, like the reigning champs haven't come off and like lost the game like that. I get it. All right, but I also think there's a little more to this because it's Angel Reese led team. I really do. I don't think if Iowa had this same kind of performance, that it would be all of this. And I get it that they're not ranked number 1, but I think it would be like, oh, just a rough night. You know, I just don't think it would be the same. I could be wrong, but I don't think it would be the same. But let's stay on this theme. Let's fill Kelsey in on what we're talking about. Let's stay on this. Yeah. Let's stay on this theme of coverage, because you mentioned that people who are like sort of starting to just get in to women's basketball or just starting to cover it. And I was thinking about this also for another reason, but I'm so glad you brought this up, Terrika, because look, we want people to start covering it. And like, honestly, I'm new to it too. So I'm learning, right? I'm better now at the WNBA. I'm taking on college to tackle it. And I'm not doing it because like I'm being mandated. This is something I want to do because I'm interested in it. But if you're going to cover it, for whatever reason you're going to cover it, please do it properly. Please take the time to do the research, and please have the appropriate people on to talk if you don't know it, because then we get broadcasts where people are talking about people coming out of college and saying, oh, you know, they ain't gonna make as much in the WNBA. They ain't gonna make as much in the WNBA. It's like, why is that the focus of the conversation? You're also like, we understand that, yes, WNBA salaries are what they are and they need to be paid more. And we can always have that conversation, but let's not act like players still can't get endorsements, even if it's not NIL. Let's just not misrepresent information because you haven't taken the time to really have real thoughts on the topic you're going to discuss. So we're going to like just use a talking point that's not even accurate. So I'm assuming that's what you were thinking about, Terrika. Did I read your mind correctly?
Sis, you read my mind 100% correctly.
I love it.
Because I think there are people who misunderstand that there is a difference between salaries and endorsements. And currently, these women and all student athletes don't make a salary. They're not paid by the university to make money. They're paid off of their image and likenesses from people who are endorsing them. And those things don't stop because you go professional. So for someone to say, well, I don't know why such and such would not want to come out of college early if she goes to the WNBA, she's going to lose all her money and not make any money. Wrong. All she's doing is going from the college level to the professional level where she will still receive endorsements. And if she has a good agent, she might make a little bit more off that endorsement contract than she currently would make as a collegiate athlete. So it's important for people to understand that there is a difference. Yes, there is absolutely a difference in the salaries that players in the W make, but endorsement deals, there are currently players right now who are making millions of dollars off of endorsement deals, and several different endorsement deals from several different angles. So please stop feeding this negative narrative and feeding and sharing misinformation about the kind of money that players can make in the W, especially if you have not been covering NCAA women's college basketball or the WNBA long enough to truly understand how this works. It was so bad, and I was so disappointed when I had seen some of those clips floating around social media. And it just really bugged me, especially when you tied this into the Angel Reese conversation, because she, as well as Caitlin Clark and others who have years of eligibility left based on their COVID standings, there are people who are making the assumption that they're not going to want to come out and are not going to want to play professionally. And then there's also this association of money to professionalism, where it's, I only want to go to the next level to make more money. And so because I'm not going to make more money, I'm not going to be interested in going to the next level. No, there are so many perks that come along with playing at the professional level. And a lot of the time, this is the dream of these young women, to play at the level in the WNBA. So please stop feeding that narrative. Please stop sharing misinformation. These girls are going to be able to make as much money as they want, as they are allowed to. And it doesn't matter the level that they play. What they need to do is make sure that they're doing what they need to do now collegiately, because it will humble you when you get to the WNBA and you find out that these women are stronger, faster, much more on an IQ spectrum than some other players are when it comes to playing at the highest level in the world. And you will find out real quick that your NIL deal don't have nothing to do with how you about to get beat off the block and everywhere else when it comes to playing in the WNBA. So please take advantage of your collegiate years to learn this game and prepare yourself for the next level. The money will be there.
Thank you, Terrika. You keep leading me where I want to go next. Kelsey, let me ask you a question. We're going to stick with coverage because, again, this was during my prep for this. I kept seeing things that annoyed me. Okay. Yeah. So what do you think? Because Caitlin Clark, let's just get this out the way. Caitlin Clark, is going to be a superstar, as she's already won, and she's going to continue that. I believe she is a player who will be successful at the pro level. So let's just be clear about that. Okay. And Caitlin Clark is great and deserves all the coverage that she gets. Let's be clear about that as well. Okay. But we still have to remind you guys, and when I say you guys, I mean the audience, the people who are new to this space, that there is definitely a difference in the coverage of Black players and white players, how they're discussed, how they're described, how they're talked about. Well, let's stay on this headline for a second, which I have no problem with. Generational player Caitlin Clark puts on a show and they give her stats. She is a generational player, but I don't feel like I see this terminology or this phrasing. I don't remember it being used for Aaliyah Boston, who is a generational player. I don't hear it being discussed for anyone else. And there was a big debate last year about whether Aaliyah Boston was the best player, in NCAA, or whether it was Caitlin Clark. And now Kelsey, right? I see tweets like she put up 44 points last night. Look, that is 44 points. 44 points. Listen, anybody putting up 44 points, you are a hooper, okay? So let's just be clear. And she's tied with Kelsey Plum and someone else, I forget, for like the most 30-point games, is it? So look, she is a baller, right? But I saw people saying she is the best women's basketball player, pro or college, right now.
Okay. All right.
I need the hyperbole to stop. Listen, what we're not going to do is disrespect the likes of Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart, right? And we're not going to erase Black women. And that's what happens with coverage of women's basketball at the pro level. So I want to know, Kelsey, what do you think about what like this conversation that's happening as Caitlin Clark's star continues to rise?
Yeah, this takes me back to my undergraduate days, Natalie, because it's the exact reason why I studied sports media and African American studies, because I was tired from a young
Love that.
age of sports coverage that was happening. This is not a new phenomenon, folks, what we're seeing with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. We've seen this movie before. We've seen this story before with other folks. And unfortunately, in 2023, we haven't advanced the levels that we've needed to from what should be educated media, right, that's covering this league. And so all this to say, like you said, Caitlin Clark, the girl's great. I mean, and obviously she galvanizes folks in ways that I think is great for the game of women's basketball. Like anytime you have all those eyes on watching her play in Charlotte, or I remember reading last year, like anywhere that Caitlin Clark is playing, attendance goes up like by 3,000. But all that to say, what you said is so right. This girl is great, but we're still learning more of her story and her journey. And if you look at the 44 points and you look at the numbers, and if you think maybe you're like, hey, 13 to 31 is great, it's not great, but she made 44 points. I know that's the larger story, but Caitlin Clark, and you think about what she has to carry for her team as well. I think she has a heavy burden for this Iowa team. I love this video and what she means for college basketball. I mean, it seems like everywhere she goes, people want to get an autograph from her. She's inspiring people. But there's a reason why I think Caitlin Clark gets covered differently, and it's because people have made Angel Reese the villain in college basketball. Let's just name it. They've made her this evil woman, and that goes back to race and sex and so many other things. And Caitlin's kind of seen as this angel in college basketball, and like she can do no wrong. I mean, I don't know her personally, but again, great baller, great hooper, but she's still learning the game of basketball. As Terrika said, college is such a great place to continue to learn how to be the best. We're not going to disrespect those in the WNBA this early on and already crown her with something that she's still working towards. Now, maybe if all three of us have this conversation, I don't know, 10 years from now, maybe we will say Caitlin Clark, is one of the greatest, but we're not there yet, right? Again, her story is still being written, it's still being developed. But let's just be honest, the crowds that Caitlin Clark attracts, a lot of those crowds do look much like Caitlin Clark, and people get very comfortable with people that look like them. They get very comfortable with praising people that look like them because there's a otherness, right? And there's I don't know if I can support this person. So all that to say, I think Caitlin is a safe figure for some people to like in women's college basketball, and they see Angel Reese and those like her as a danger. And so I think, unfortunately, those who try to say, sports it doesn't touch race and all those different things, they're out of their minds, because sports, I think, just, if anything, exemplifies what we see in society, because much what Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese go through is the same thing that many Black women and white women go through with their coworkers, on an everyday basis. So all that to say, again, not taking anything away from Caitlin Clark. I want to make that very clear. I love her game. I think she's a phenomenal player. I think we're all privileged to be able to watch the women's game right now as it is, but we need to stop. We need to stop trying to give this girl more accolades while she's, again, still growing, still learning, and is still trying to achieve the greatness of those who came before her. So I think I just have to name that, Natalie. And one thing I will say, that I think Caitlin is very humble, and I do want to say that. I feel like a lot of these things coming out are from others and society placing these labels on her.
Sure.
But
This is not no issue with
she
Caitlin.
loves the game to play. So I don't want to say this is also Caitlin doing this. But I also think, again, that she's also not calling it out, I think, in a way that I think, again, pays tribute or respect to those who came before her. But if anything, it makes my job great, Nat, because I get to go on shows like this and explain why these issues exist, and unfortunately why they continue to exist, not just in the women's game per se, also in the men's game. That's why I said we've seen this story before, where we try to crown this great white hope very early on, and try to get support her way and take it away from others.
Can I just throw in here really quickly that
I do. I want to ask you a question. So hold your thought, and then if you could give it to us and add on to this. I'm just curious, because you bring up, Caitlin's young right now, and I'm curious, Terrika, what you think is the responsibility for her? Because, I mean, we talk about this now in the W in terms of the white players and their allyship. And we know that Kelsey Plum is one of them who calls this out, and others, not so much. They're aware of the disparities and discrepancies, and they're not necessarily the ones who are at fault for how the media covers them or what people say, but they don't call it out actively. They don't make it a point to point it out in a way that someone like a Kelsey Plum has. And so Caitlin's young right now, and I don't know that I would necessarily put that on her yet, but I do think at some point I would like to see more allyship from the white players and calling this out and pointing this out. So please finish your thought that you were going to say, but I want to know your thoughts on that as well, Terrika.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I'll make this really quick because it's so funny. I was literally just having this conversation with Lo. Lo's been on the show a few times, and we were in Paris together. So we were having this conversation about how players like, for example, Sabrina Ionescu, who has a lot of things afforded to her, but doesn't really speak out about how those things could look different as, you know, a player like even on the collegiate level, Paige Beckers. If you guys recall last year, Paige Beckers, when she received her ESPY award, she talked about the disparity in coverage between Black players and white players and talked about the phenomenal players that are still on the collegiate level that are playing and how they need to have a little bit more acknowledgement. And so I think that there are a couple of things here at play. Number one, I think we have to, understand that everybody is different in terms of their personality traits, right? And so the way that I might speak out and the way that I might be very blunt about things may not be the same way that somebody else is doing it, right? Number two, we have to also understand that sometimes these players aren't making decisions on their own. Sometimes there are people like publicists. Sometimes there are people like agents, managers, and others who are making decisions for them in terms of what they acknowledge, what they don't acknowledge, for whatever reason that may be. Could be endorsement deals, could be money, could be whatever. Not everybody is willing to risk their privilege for that. And we have to accept that, right? Doesn't mean we like it. Doesn't mean we feel like that's what we would do, but we got to accept that everybody not going to be militant and speak out and risk their whatever they got going on for whatever their lifestyle is. People aren't just not going to do it. One thing that I brought it up though with bringing up Lo is because I think she made an incredible point where she was like, hey, maybe you speaking out isn't something that you would do in the way that we think you should do it. But there's also this part where it's like, hey, I got a shoe deal and I love having a shoe deal and I'm not going to give my shoe deal back. But I could also say, you know, I'm glad to have had this opportunity and I would love to see other people in the league have an opportunity to have a shoe deal like A'ja Wilson. And I thought that that was a phenomenal point because there are different ways that you can bring attention to something without explicitly bringing attention to it. I didn't get to the point about Caitlin Clark, which I'll get to another time, just because last year I remember covering her specifically with the You Can't See Me thing. And I started circulating around TikTok and all these other places because people were using my clip to try to prove a point that was a completely wrong point to begin with. But I wanted to bring that up just to mention that yes, there is villainism happening with Angel Reese, and there is villainism happening with other Black players in women's basketball, both collegiately and professional. And we have to continue to call it out every time we see it in order to get people to stop doing it. It starts with media companies, writers, people, journalists. It starts with us. We've got to call it out when we see it. We've got to stop doing it. And then we can continue to get other people like fans to jump on board with calling it out as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Terrika. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks, Terrika.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.